part of this month's gut health focus, today we are going to go through what is fermentation, what are the benefits of eating fermented foods, what foods can you ferment, then we will go through a hands-on workshops. We'll actually be making beets, and then you can come on and try, sample some food that's fermented, and then we have recipes at the end. Okay, so on to Heather.
First off, I'd like to thank Willy. She's put a lot of effort into this. Everything you see here has been prepared by Willy.
With love.
With love. And gloves.
And green hands.
Who's going first?
And also, before I get started, I just want to make sure everybody realizes we are not here to recommend you eat fermented food. You need to go and do your research on fermented food. This is a result of Trion Moore's recommendation. And all we're doing is sharing with you what we've been doing, I've been doing for the last 2 years in fermenting foods, and I haven't died of eating fermented foods, and I think there is a benefit. So we're going to share with you today how to make your own versus buying what you can get in the store today. Okay? So what I'm going to do is, like Willy said, I'm going to just go over what is fermented foods, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding of what a fermented food is. So I'm going to just give you a little bit of background. You can research it yourself on the internet. You can find the pros and cons. I would just suggest, especially if you're pregnant, I would just suggest you make sure you find out from your doctor that you're good to eat it, because it is bacteria. Okay? What it is it's called lactofermentation. So what lacto stands for is lactic acid. All right? So most vegetables contain some kind of sugar, which is natural sugar. So when you go to ferment, you're actually fermenting the sugar. The sugar is turning into lactic acid. And that is actually just, like it sounds, it's rotting food. Okay? So when you go to ferment, and actually, I want to be honest with you, that's exactly what's happening. When you go to ferment, it's actually a process. That's why it's not done in the fridge. It's kept outside. You're isolating the oxygen getting to the food, and the sugars within that food is actually turning into lactic acid, which then turns into a form of fermentation, along with the brine, which is the salt. When you hear of a lot of pickling, you use vinegars. You boil the goods first, and then you put them into vinegar. Completely different. Okay. So Willy has done some forms for you. One of the benefits I find from fermented foods, because you're not boiling the foods, you're actually maintaining the vitamins within the vegetables. Okay? When you go to pickle or do any of the traditional type of pickling, you're boiling that food. So you're losing some of the vitamins, never mind the good bacteria that's in the food. So that's why I tend to do fermenting only on certain items that I'm comfortable with. You'll find I'll give you a couple examples of no-fail foods, which are the beets, and some of the more difficult ones are the pickles, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And you can actually do kimchi, kombucha. I've never tried kombucha, but if you remember when the Mississauga News was here, and we met with them regarding our Good Life Award, she actually did her own kombucha. Yeah. So as soon as she found out we were talking about fermentation, she was like, "Oh, I'll bring you in some of my kombucha." And so a number of people do it. I know my grandmother, and I didn't realize it till later on, my grandmother used to actually make sauerkraut through the fermentation process. And some of you might remember your grandparents putting food into the cellar and it never actually being refrigerated, but they were fermenting foods and then bringing it up into the fridge, and that was how they were taught to do it for many years. So it has been done for a number of years, and it is a form of basically what I've said. It's fermenting of the foods, okay? And it's depending on the types of foods and how much sugar they have in it. One thing I do want to mention is there's been some question about fermentation and alcohol, and the relation about how much alcohol is in fermented foods. It depends how much sugar and how long you leave it. Usually with the vegetables and foods we're talking about, if they get to a point where they're alcohol, you won't be able to eat it. It's like a rotting apple, right? It's like a rotting apple on the ground. It has a level of alcohol. If you've ever seen a chipmunk or a bird that's eaten a bad apple and they start flying around all funny, there's alcohol in the rotten food. And the store-bought ones, you'll never see alcohol on it, but they're fermented foods. So, but there could be a small trace, but typically you're not going to find large amounts of alcohol in it. But it's fermentation, right? That's where grapes, wine, right? So anyways, I just wanted to bring that up. So, in a nutshell, what we do, it's actually a very simple process. I find it easier than pickling, right? All you're doing is actually cleaning your foods, cleaning your utensils, and then cutting it up, putting it in a jar, putting some salt water on it, and letting it sit for a certain number of days, depending on what the food is. So we'll go through that. So we pulled in some benefits that Trion had brought up when she was here, and I just want to review that with you a little bit. So again, she had indicated it helps your body digest food. Because it has good bacteria, it's in your stomach and it's helping digest your food a lot faster. So it boosts immunity, making you less sick because you've got all this good bacteria happening in your belly and it's getting rid of all that bad bacteria. Full of probiotics, so a big discussion about probiotics. I mean, that's, you look at kefir or any of your yogurts, they've got probiotics. Probiotics is exactly the good bacteria. Reduces inflammation, helps to rid the body of yeast infections, improves heart health, balances cholesterol levels. There's a whole number of benefits from this. I'm not saying it's going to do every single one of these for each of you. These are just some of the benefits that people have realized. Now we're going to talk about what food you can ferment. These are just some of the ones that we feel are fairly easy to do. I find the beets, the ones we've done for you today, is the easiest. It takes 3 to 4 days. I actually did 4 batches. It took me like not even an hour. They're very, very quick, and it's very successful. So beets are really easy to do. The other thing I want to mention too, you don't sit down and eat a whole jar of these, because if you do, you might find a reaction, right? It is a lactic acid, and you could get moving things along pretty quickly. So it's meant to have, a little bit maybe on a salad, or I tend to put them on my salad. Like I'll just do like a tablespoon or 2 and I put it in with my salad. So you decide how you want to do it. Take a little bit at a time. I could certainly sit down and eat like half a jar like that and not have any reaction. All right, that's not a problem because I've been eating it for a while, right? So I definitely recommend the beets. I have played around with pickles. Pickles are a little more challenging. We've had some challenges trying to get the brine just right, and the most important thing is getting really fresh vegetables. Okay, so if you've got a vegetable that's been sitting in your fridge for about a week or 2 and it's starting to get soft, don't use it. Okay, because it's not going to be successful. You want something that's really firm and is fresh. If you can pick it from your own garden, that's even better. Okay, because you're going to have better results. I do have pickles that I've done, and they last for months. They take about 2 weeks. I put them into a dark area, and you have to burp them. So what that means is, because of the lactic acid coming up in the jars, you have to actually go and open them, or they'll blow up. So you have to open them up and they just fizz, and you do that for about every 2 days or something like that.
But once you burp them, then you can put them in the fridge though, right?
Well, during the 2 weeks, you do it a couple of times until they're done. And then once they're done, everything has to go in the fridge because you want to stop the fermentation process, okay? So you can't just leave these out on your shelf for a period of time. You have to keep tasting them and making sure that they're how you want them and how you like them. As soon as they're done, they go in the fridge. Okay.
How long do they last in the fridge?
It depends on what it is. A lot of the recipes that we have will make recommendations to how long you can keep them. Some of them are months.
Okay.
Okay. But a lot of the recipes we have will tell you. We've got books on it, so everything's different depending on what it is. Also, when you open up something and it doesn't smell right, regardless of what they tell you, don't eat it. That's just, that's usually you can tell. As soon as you go to open it up and you smell it, go, I ain't touching that, right? But I've not had any problem. I've had these things in for months. They never last that long, quite honestly. Like you're not making 100 jars of these. Because they're so quick, especially the beets. You can do 4 jars and then do another 4 in another couple of weeks, right?
It's not like pickling where you do like a huge
and it's
batch
such a level of effort, right? And I recommend you do smaller batches, because if you have something go wrong, you don't want it being in your whole batch, right? I do find the beets, very rarely does something go wrong. Like you can't really go wrong because beets are such a strong vegetable anyways. Same with sauerkraut. I've done sauerkraut, I've done it with red cabbage, and I've done it with green cabbage. Can't go wrong, right? I've just and it says about 2 weeks for the sauerkraut. Mine didn't even take that long. You have to try it, right, to your taste. So you open up the lid, you let the gases come out, you just take a little bit. Say, it's not bad, it's getting there, and experiment with it. of see what you want. But I've done the sauerkraut and it's really good. I've done pickles with hot peppers and garlic, and you can play around with it.
What's the best kind of jar to put it in? Is it
Yeah, I use mason jars. Most of the recipes are quarts, so I would recommend using like a quart. Okay, but we use mason jars. It's no different than if you were doing your own canning. You do follow all the same rules. Make sure you clean them out really well, and sterilize them, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Follow all the same rules. If you got bacteria in your kitchen, you don't want it getting in there.
And you can, sterilizing, you can always reuse your jars.
Yeah.
I always buy new lids.
Yeah,
so,
they
because do
always
tend to
recommend
rust.
get new lids, okay? And they're really inexpensive, and they come in a little box, and I always throw away my lids. But I put these in the dishwasher and just clean them out really good, and I've never had an issue. I reuse my jars all the time, okay? Let me see. So we've talked about a little bit how much to eat on a regular basis. Like I said, don't sit down and eat a whole jar. Or that could be our next, what's our next?
Transit time, everyone.
Transit time. Okay, that might help with the transit time. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the jars. Now let's talk about some of the things that we find works best, okay? There's been a lot of debate on what kind of water you should use. So a lot of this, and Willy's actually going to go through some of that, but we recommend distilled water. It just works. A lot of the recipes, they'll have different recommendations. I've always used distilled water.
And I've used both.
Yeah.
I find distilled water just a better product.
Yeah. So I tend to use distilled water. As well as the type of salt, that you gotta be careful. You can't use table salt, okay? I use Himalayan salt, and I just like Himalayan salt. So I use the fine, okay, but Willy uses the granular, and all you have to do is just make sure that it boils down. So the key to making a brine, and we've recommended what works for us. Okay, there's lots of different recipes for brine, so you can test out yourself. We put one in here that's worked for both Willy and I. And the thing with making a brine is you get your water boiling, you put your salt in, you dissolve the salt, then you let it cool. You do not want to put hot brine in with your vegetables, because why? It's going to cook them, and that's not what you want to happen, right? So if it cooks them, then you might end up with a soggy product as well. One of the things I do find, and you'll find when you taste the beets, it's crunchy. It's actually, when you first taste it versus like a normal beet, like a pickled beet, they're kind of soft. These are crunchy, and you're getting all of the vitamins and whatnot. I love them. I can eat them all the time. But. Okay, so we got the brine. We do put in the suggested recipe. Try and avoid any dust particles getting into it, so keep a lid on it while it's cooling. And what else do we have here? Again, we said clean all your tools. Burp if burping, if we see that in a recipe, it just means opening up the lid and just, you'll watch the bubbles come up. And the only reason they suggest to do that, if you've got a long-term, if you've got something that has to sit for 2 weeks and you don't burp it, you're gonna have like an explosion on your hands when you go, because it's the lactic acid, right? So you wanna make sure that you just slightly open it up and let the air bubbles come out and you're fine. Okay, so where are we at here? You can experiment with different spices and herbs too. So there's lots of different recipes if you Google it to add different things to whatever you're fermenting. For example, there's 2 here that the recipe was for cloves. We have whole cloves, and then we've got ground cloves. You can play around with it, like just figure out what works for you. There's also garlic in these ones, and fennel seeds. Some say mustard seeds. Whatever you want to try. You can't really go wrong. It just changes the taste of the product. And you will find after you, for example, on the beets, once you put them in the fridge for a bit too, they still seem to add flavor because the spices are moving around, and they actually get flavorful every day. So, okay. One of the things that we did say about choosing some of the products, so we did say try and make sure it's fresh and it's firm. The other thing is that we would recommend is organic. The only reason we say that is because any modified foods has another disadvantage to it. You don't have to, it's not going to change the recipe, it's still going to work if you use, normal, store-bought, non-organic or GMO. It's still going to be fine, it's just a recommendation to try and stay organic. Okay, and I think I have covered most of it.
Do you want to talk about when you go to purchase the product, the ready-made things that you should look for?
Oh yeah, okay. Okay, so if you decide that you want to do this, you don't want to make it on your own and you want to buy it, some of the things you want to make sure that you're getting real fermented food, because sometimes it says fermented. If it's not in a refrigerator, it's really not fermented, okay? Because fermented foods has a bacteria in it, and to keep that bacteria alive, it has to remain in a fridge, right? So most of that you'll see, and also no vinegar. As soon as you see vinegar, it's killed any good bacteria in it. And these are the ones that Treon Moore talked about, if you remember. So, and if you look at the ingredients, there's no preservatives. Okay, so if you go through the ingredients on any of these, you'll find that it's all natural ingredients. You'll rarely find any, and you want to stay away from any, especially things you can't pronounce.
Could you read out that brand?
Pardon?
Can you read out that
Oh,
brand?
the brand? Boobies. Okay.
You're such a child.
Yeah, and looking for raw or live on the jar, right? So I think that's the main things here. Okay, so why don't we work with Willy now to exactly how you do this. Would you like volunteers?
Well, yes, we have Michelle and we have Lisa, and we're going to do the beets, so everybody's got a recipe. And the brine is actually there, and that's what's important, right? So Heather talked about having organic, fresh produce. So I've gone ahead and cut up everything pre-cut, and we've got the distilled water there, we've got the salt there. So I started to boil some water, but just like the shows.
Fermenting with Willy.
Yes. So for this recipe, it's beets, onions, garlic, cinnamon, fennel, and clove. So I've pre-measured everything, and again, the recipe is here. Pre-measured everything, and then the girls are gonna show you how to jar them.
Willy's bananas.
And the jars have been sterilized, they've been cleaned.
Maybe you should say what you're doing as you do it.
So it's one full onion will actually give you 2 jars. And the beets in this recipe, it's about 6 large, 7 large beets. And I've sliced these up. I find that, and you can chop them, you can grate them, you can slice them. Do you need a knife for that?
Just shove it in there.
Yeah.
The recipes will actually tell you, I think the recipe for two jars is 3 beets. Okay? Depends on the size of the beets, but you can fit a lot more in. I did the 1 jar that I did follow it exactly, and I had lots of room to throw the beets in. Okay. We should mention too, Willy, on the water when it says, okay, you're going to put 3 cups in, you could have, I think the recipe called for 3 cups. The brine recipe we give you is for 4 cups, okay? So be very careful when you're looking at what the recipe takes versus what we've given you for just a general brine.
Actually, on the beet, it's 8 cups, right? Because we're doing the 2 jars. So 8 cups of water, 4 cups and 4 cups.
Okay, yeah. So you might not be able to fit it all in there. Don't worry about it, okay? Depends how much food or product you put in there.
Do you have to put the spices on the bottom?
They recommend that because then the spices work their way up through the food.
Did you give yours a shake?
Yeah, I did, okay?
Yeah,
You just be careful. I know Willy has shaken hers before, but I get a little nervous shaking them because if you shake them too much, you get lactic acid, right? But no, I tend to do this just to make sure they get through, but that's why I put them on the bottom, because then it flows up through to the product. If you put it on top, it's not going to get to the bottom.
Very good.
So
I gotta prove that
also
first.
important that when you pour in the brine, that the produce is submerged. You can't have any floating above. It's got to stay underneath the fluid, the brine. So if you want to pour in, just be careful.
Can you use sea salt?
Yeah, the recipes say you can use sea salt. I've just never used sea salt. I tend to stay with Himalayan. What did you use, Willie? Have you used sea salt?
I have used sea
Was
salt
that good?
the first time. I found it to be a lot saltier. So,
It becomes the taste that you want out of it. I find Himalayan's not as salty.
Yeah, perfect.
And we have worked the wine recipe to try and bring down the salt content. Also, where you store this will have a factor on how quickly it ferments. Okay? If it's in a warm area, it's going to ferment a lot faster. So like in the summer, it may only take 3 days, whereas in the winter, it may take all four days. Okay?
Oh,
so
dear.
depending where you keep it.
We're just
Sorry about that. Can you edit that out?
so we've just done our first batch of fermented beets. So these will sit on the counter for 3 to 4 days, and then you can put them in the fridge.
Yep.
That's it.
That's all that.
They don't need to be in the dark while they're sitting?
No, I had them in the basement, just in a cool, dry place.
Whereas I have it in my kitchen just sitting on the counter, right? It's exposed to light and everything. Really? Not a problem. When I did my pickles, because it was 2 weeks, I put them.
Can you hold
I
up
put
the
them
beets?
downstairs away from light, but yeah.
great.
Really? Like 15 minutes of fame.
Awesome.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
so
Do you want to come up and
you're welcome to try some fermented foods. Just the kombucha, don't shake the kombucha, please.
Yeah.
Shaking.
You have more eggs. Here, why don't we put some of these on?
So you fill it up
You're like,
and then you break the
This is the culture
Hey, there we go, Willie. Moonlighting. He's asking how much for one jar.
Okay, sir.
If somebody wants more, then I'll add to it. It's kombucha.
Kombucha, yeah, it's right there, it's right there. It's a fermented tea.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it's bubbly. You can get different flavors.
Happy fermenting!